Hey guys, another video for our Buying a House in Japan playlist. Some of you guys are familiar with the goings on at the front of the old farmhouse here and next door. So we put up these privacy screens over here to give us a bit of privacy from the new neighbours and the people out on the street, because without those trees there anymore, we're really exposed to the street in that direction. So we want to keep driving in this way. Some of you remember we actually allowed for a third screen to go across to where that bamboo is, but we need this driveway because it helps us to turn around more easily. So we actually prepared for that third screen there, and the idea was to use it sometimes when we were using the pool or barbecuing or something, but it just hasn't worked that way. It's just sort of not convenient. So that's where we put that hole for the other pole. But we just haven't been doing it because it's just a lot of faffing around, and we don't like faffing in our house. So some of you are also aware that between our house and the one next door, there's this 1 meter easement that doesn't belong to us. It actually belongs to a house at the back. So that's limited what we can do there on the boundary. That person showed no interest, by the way, in any of this. The last 7 months with all this going on, you know, with them trashing the place and then us fixing it up there with the concrete, that neighbours showed zero interest. So we've decided, because that neighbours showed zero interest, let's try something else. So we've got the Unskilled concrete destroyer to come along to our brand new concrete that we just laid and try to gently make a hole in it. Didn't want to crack it all up. Picked a spot in the concrete that was sort of between two bits, so that it wasn't going into the middle of a nice piece, because it's already sort of patchy enough as it is. And the Unskilled concreter actually done a pretty good job of that, so it was pretty thick and pretty solid. It took a bit to get through it, but got through it. So I finally managed to do it without too much problem. Made it deep enough. And then want to make another one, but again you can see there's a couple of decent slabs there that the Unskilled concrete put down recently. But see that dodgy looking concrete there, the lumpy looking stuff? So there's the smooth stuff. So that lumpy stuff was done by the professionals next door. Had some leftover concrete from something and threw that down, and it turns out that was much softer and much dodgier. The stuff dropped there by the professionals was much easier to get through. It seemed to have less cement in it, so it was softer, which was sort of good. So that was a good decision, to go down where they left their crappy looking concrete rather than break up our new smoother concrete. So it's still patchy, but again, you know, balance. It's an old farmhouse. One day it's going to be demolished probably. Pouring too much money into it, you know, going and putting a big concrete slab all the way to the street, cost of thousands of dollars, is sort of a waste of time. This particular project, we had all the materials already. It was just labour and one pole that we needed for this project. That's why we're trying it. So it's a bit of an experiment. It's a bit of an experiment. We're not quite sure what's going to happen because this doesn't belong to us, right? So the thinking is, because we've got all the materials we need pretty much except for one pole, to just do this job, see if we like it, and see if the people at the back who own that easement have any problem. We don't think they will, because they've showed zero interest in any of this. When it was all messed up there and they weren't interested, when we fixed it they weren't interested. They're just staying right out of it. So again, got the materials. So we already had 20 kilograms of concrete. We already had the pipes. So you can see that pipe there, the grey pipe with the little yellow cap on it. So mix up the concrete, 20 kilos. So again, it's still pretty warm at the moment, still about 34 degrees and about 75% humidity. So it was pretty warm work. So yeah, just getting a level onto it there, trying to get it as vertical as possible. Because when you stick a 3 meter pole out of that hole, any sort of variation on the verticalness of it is going to be pronounced, isn't it? So reasonably vertical, then move on to the other one. So again, just a bit of old downpipe, happens to be the right size there. And then see how that concrete laid by the professionals there is looking pretty dodgy. So it turns out the 20 kilos was more than was needed. So decided to continue that concrete in this direction and try and sort of patch over where those guys have done their dodgy work. So they'd just thrown that in there. That was just their sort of leftover from some project next door, and they just sort of threw it over the edge without making too much effort, as you can see. So it's still all sort of patchy. With these old houses, you can't spend too much money on them because you're overcapitalised and you'll never get your money back. So it's sort of always a balancing act as to how much you spend, and putting labour into it's okay, but you don't want to put too much money into it because you're sort of throwing it away. So again, when we're finished, it's still going to be fairly patchy concrete, but as long as it's smooth and we haven't got rocks all over the place, and it's better than it was, we feel we've achieved something. So that's where we've got to at the moment. So just leave that for a couple of days to dry. So that's sort of a bit better than it was. That's the sort of thinking. You'll never make it perfect. Old places like this, without spending way too much money, you're never going to make it perfect. But as long as it's clean and tidy and neat, better than it was, we've done something worthwhile. And then a couple of days later, the concrete's sort of reasonably solid. Come back and cut that pipe off, stick a cap in it. Now the idea is, if for some strange reason the people who own that easement, from the people from out the back who own the easement, come along and say they don't like what we're about to do, that's what we can do. We can just take what we've done out, stick the yellow cap in, and that's what it will look like. And they've got to be happy with that. The kid that lives there walks backwards and forwards along this, going to and from school, and that's it. So as it was, the way that the professionals left it, there was stones and sand and rocks and stuff all over the place. Whereas now, at least it's a nice clean surface that he walks back and forwards on. So if they don't like what we're about to do, we'll just take it away and put those yellow caps in, and that'll be the end of it. But we suspect they're not even going to comment because they're just not interested. So this is a bit of an experiment to work out how to get the poles the same height, make them, equal heights, which is difficult because they're 4 metres apart. So I used a rope and measured to the ground, and then cut the pipe off with the eyes closed, right? Should have gone and got the goggles, but just closed the eyes instead. There's some unskilled metalwork for you. Obviously, if there was going to be lots of cuts, would have gone and got the goggles and the earmuffs, but it was just one cut, one quick cut. And then some of you would have seen the last job. That's downpipe, plastic downpipe. So rather than trying to paint that pole, which it proved to be impossible, just put the plastic downpipe around the outside. So you've got the nice finish of the plastic downpipe, but you've got the strength of the metal inside. So that seems to work pretty well. And that was pretty cheap. That's all we had to buy. We had to buy that pole, and we had to buy a piece of plastic downpipe. So it was about $20. Everything else we already had the privacy screen, we already had all the other fittings and bits and pieces we already had left over, and old bits lying around that we could use. So nice. So obviously there's one more. There's a 2 metre one that we had to put on as well. Stick them in the ground. Boom, boom, cap on. So there's a bit of trial and error to try and make them sort of square and make it look sort of okay. Bit of faffing around, bit of patience required. So it's all removable. We've got little hooks that hold the screens up, and obviously the poles can come out of the ground, so it's all removable. If we get a big typhoon coming, or if we've got, for some other reason, we want to remove it, it's easy to remove. And it's the way to go. There's been a lot of people make other suggestions what we could do, but for the cost effectiveness thing, and again, we don't want to spend a lot of money, it's sort of, we're pretty happy with it as an option. So as you can see, most of the front of the house, we're still looking at greenery, our trees and our bamboo, but just that direction. And it has made a difference. They've started moving in, people have been coming and going, and it has made a difference. We feel better. We don't feel so exposed on that side. We're not always looking at those guys coming and going. It's much better. So we're quite happy with it. Anyway, there was that. More videos coming soon.